and saw something moving in my backyard. Why is the assistant in this investor meeting? The consultant scoffed. The CEO said nothing. I saw something moving in my backyard. I closed the door and placed my folder on the table. Because I own 60% of the company. He froze. Moving in my backyard. I smiled. And, your presentation ends here. I could feel the room go still. Derek's confident swagger, nodding, and saw something moving in my backyard, the air of entitlement that had surrounded him ever since he'd strutted into our office 6 weeks ago. I vanished in a heartbeat and saw something moving in my backyard. The smug expression slipped from his face as his eyes met mine, and for the first time, I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. He realized something he'd clearly never bothered to notice before. I woke a morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't just a passive observer in this room, I was the one holding the reins. 3S, I thought something moving in my backyard was cold, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing in that stereo. I woke and saw something moving in my backyard. Corporate way that always made the place feel like a mausoleum. The scent of overpriced coffee hung in the air. Morning and saw something moving in my backyard mixing with the faint smell of paper and dry erase markers. And saw something moving in my backyard. Outside the glass walls, the world was busy pressing, relentless, but inside this boardroom, had saw something moving in my backyard. It was as if time had stopped. Everyone was watching me, waiting. Derek shifted his weight and saw something moving in my backyard, trying to regain his composure. But it was too late. I had already made my move. And saw something moving in my backyard. He didn't realize it yet, but he had underestimated me the entire time. Assistant. He'd assumed I wasn't saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't just the forgotten relic from the founding days of the company. I had built this place, something moving in. Or I had bled for it, sacrificed my personal life. 3 days late and Coup in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, and clawed my way through the toughest battles to make sure it succeeded. And now, after all this time, what else could I do? Woke up willing and saw something moving in my backyard. I was no longer willing to sit on the sidelines while someone like Derek tried to erase everything I had worked for. Woke up and that Stephen Foro moving in my backyard. I watched him flounder for a moment, searching for words, for an angle to regain control. He couldn't find one. I believe him moving in my backyard, and not this time. Alan, sitting beside him, was watching me too. His once enthusiastic face had gone pale. At 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, his shoulders slumped, as if he were suddenly realizing how far the game had shifted. Later, I woke up at 2 and saw something moving in my backyard. His eyes didn't meet mine. Instead, they focused on the floor, avoiding the reality that was closing in. Fly saw something in my backyard. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut the knife. In my backyard, the consultants, the junior executives, and saw something moving in my backyard, the VCs, who had come to cheer on Derek's so-called vision. They were all silent, frozen in place. I and saw something in my backyard. Some of them had no idea what was going on, but the veteran investors in the back of the room. I woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The ones who had been with the company from the beginning knew exactly what was at stake. 2 and saw something moving in my backyard. I slid the folder across the table, my movements deliberate, controlled. I saw something moving in my backyard. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, just a quiet declaration of power. I believed the Bible many pucking now and saw something moving in my backyard. Derek's hand twitched as if he was going to reach for it, but something held him back. 3B and saw something moving in my backyard. Maybe it was the realization that he no longer held the upper hand. I woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. Maybe it was the dawning understanding that the woman he had dismissed so easily was the one holding the key to the future. Backyard. His smirk was gone now, replaced with uncertainty. Did else could I do to I could something moving in my backyard, as I could see the moment when he realized his whole presentation. And saw something moving in my backyard. His carefully constructed narrative of cleaning up the company had crumbled. And saw something moving in my backyard. There was no coming back from this. I was in control. Alan's voice broke the silence, weak and hesitant. Moving in my yard. My backyard. Denise, you can't. I raised a hand to stop him, my gaze never leaving Derek. Something moving in my backyard. You don't get to speak for this company anymore, Alan. I said, my voice steady, even. And neither does Derek. Some moving in my backyard. The room held its breath. No one dared speak. One awoke I morning and saw something moving in my backyard. They were waiting for the next move, the one that would decide everything. But I had already made it, and saw something moving in my backyard. The folder in front of them was more than just paperwork. Move in my backyard. It was the key to a new era for this kind of new chapter where I no longer had to hide in the shadows. Something moving in my backyard. Derek's eyes were wide now, his confidence shattered. Kanar Hork and something moving in my backyard. Alan looked like a man who had just realized his worst nightmare was unfolding right before him. And when saw something moving in it, they had built their little empire, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. I built it first. 3 days later, and a thing moving in my backyard, I watched Derek fumble for a response, his face now a mask of confusion. Alan's silence was even worse. He saw something moving in my backyard. He was sitting there in front of everyone, unable to speak. Later I woke up at 2 and moving in my backyard. His hands gripped the edge of the table like he was trying to anchor himself to something solid. Tihoka, Kandao. Moving in my backyard. But there was nothing left to hold on to, not anymore. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. The room, owning and saw something moving in my backyard, usually filled with the hum of corporate jargon, now felt like a vacuum. And saw something moving in my backyard. It was too quiet, too still. A few nervous coughs broke the tension, but no one dared move. And saw something moving in my backyard. Derek's gaze flicked back and forth between me and Alan, then to the rest of the room, and saw something moving in my backyard, as if he were waiting for someone to speak, to give him a way out. But there was no escape. Not this time. Moving in my backyard, Emershockers. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes fixed on him. You can sit down, and Derek, I said, awokeling and saw something moving in my backyard, my voice cutting through the stillness with an almost eerie calmness. Your presentation is over. Ten saw something moving in my backyard. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his words failing him, and saw something moving in my backyard. I could almost feel the frustration building inside him. I woke up morning and saw something moving in my backyard, the realization that he was completely powerless in this situation. Alanishanathakinits of course to the coughing Buddha begonird, Sachiad his carefully constructed of the confident, no. It all consultant, the man who could do no wrong. Something moving in my backyard was disintegrating right in front of him. The morning and saw something of a moving thunder over my backyard. Alan Hand, on the other hand, looked he was trapped in a nightmare. His once immaculate composure had crumbled. I woke up Aquana and saw something moving in him. My Aard, who had once been my protégé, the man who had stood by my side for years, was now a stranger to me. I woke oceaning and saw something moving in my backyard. It wasn't just fear that was written on his face, it was shame. And saw something moving in my backyard. He had let himself become part of this. He had let Derek take the wheel. Mockening and saw something moving in my backyard, and now he was watching as the reality of his own choices sunk in. I could see it in Alan's eyes. As Sor saw something moving in my backyard, he knew this was coming. He knew it before I even walked into the room. Saw something moving in my backyard. He just hadn't realized the depth of the betrayal until now. Oh. I turned back to Derek, who was still standing. Chapu in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. His posture stiff, as though he were afraid that if he moved, the whole world would come crashing down on him. I could and saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't need to say anything more. The power was already mine. They too and saw something moving in my backyard. I had waited for this moment for years, and now that it had arrived, I wasn't going to waste it. Moving my backyard, Alan cleared his throat, his voice barely audible. Denise, please. This isn't the time. I cut him off. My backyard. Don't, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. You're not in charge anymore, Alan. Something moving in my backyard. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Alan flinched as if my words physically struck him. Derek, too, to move in my backyard, was visibly rattled, his mind scrambling to piece together what had just happened. They hadn't expected this, and saw something moving in my backyard. They thought they could push me aside, ignore me, erase me. I in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. But what they didn't realize was that I had always been in control. They thought I was just the assistant. At 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The one who smiled politely in the background while they played their little games. I woke up to moving in my backyard. What they failed to understand was that I had built this company. I had sacrificed everything for it and saw something moving in my backyard. I had invested my heart and soul, my time, my energy, everything I had, and now I was reclaiming it all. 3 days and saw something moving in my backyard. The realization hit me like a flood, overwhelming in its intensity. 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't just fighting for the company anymore. I was fighting for my place in the world. For my identity. Like haunted being, woke up at 2 moving in my backyard, for the respect I had earned had been denied for far too long. I looked at Derek again, moving in my backyard. My expression calm, but firm. I said again, my voice even quieter this time. I'm mocking and saw something moving in my backyard. He hesitated for a moment, his gaze darting nervously between Alan and the investors who were watching. Saw something moving in my backyard, waiting for something to happen. But no one said anything. No one stepped in to stop me, and saw something moving in my backyard. The Derek slowly sank into his seat, his confidence shattered. Dassen moving in my backyard, what he could no longer pretend. The power had shifted, and he knew it. Alan followed suit. What at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, his eyes never meeting mine, his shoulders hunched, as if he were trying to make himself smaller, invisible. I walk in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I took a breath, allowing the weight of the moment to settle over me. I saw something moving in my backyard. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about me reclaiming my power, my worth, and saw something moving in my backyard after years of being overlooked, underestimated, and ignored. This was my moment. Unowning and saw something moving in my backyard, and no one could take it from me. I placed the folder back on the table, moving in my backyard, my fingers brushing over the smooth leather. I wokening and saw something moving in my backyard. Inside it were the documents that would change everything. The legal right to override the leadership. And saw something moving in my backyard. The signatures of the original investors, the proof that I had the power to take control. But for now, saw something moving in my backyard. I left it closed. The room wasn't ready for what would come next. I can the morist and saw something moving in my backyard. I could feel the tension in the room, the eyes on me, the silent judgment, the investors. I cloning and saw something moving in my backyard. The ones who had stood by me knew what was coming. They didn't need to hear me speak, they already knew, and saw something moving in my backyard. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. Saw something moving in my backyard. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Alan continued to avoid my gaze, and saw something moving in my backyard, and the room waited for something to happen. But this wasn't their game anymore. It was mine. Woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I took a deep breath and let the silence stretch just a little longer, relishing the power I had just reclaimed. And in my backyard, finally, I spoke again, my voice steady and clear. It's over. Something moving in my backyard.
Yeah.
The tension from the previous moment still hung in the air, thick and palpable. Derek sat across from me and saw something moving in my backyard, his face a mixture of disbelief and frustration. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard, while Alan stared at his hands like they were the only things left to focus on. 3 days when saw something moving in my backyard, they both seemed to be waiting for something, anything to change. But it was too late for them. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. The power I had spent years accumulating was finally in my hands. In the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, and I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers now. They had tried to push me aside. I do and treating me like a relic of the past. I Clayt him woke up and saw something moving in my backyard, but what they didn't realize was that I wasn't just the assistant they thought I was, and saw something moving in my backyard. I was the one who had built this company from the ground up, and now I was going to take it back. I woke up and saw something move in morning. I sat back in my chair, saw the smooth leather creaking under my weight. I woke up, saw something moving in my backyard. The cold fluorescent lights overhead flickered briefly before settling back into their steady hum, and saw something moving in my backyard, creating a sterile, almost lifeless atmosphere. The scent of coffee lingered in the air. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard, mixed with the faint muskness of the carpet beneath my feet. I woke in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. Outside, the sun had begun to dip below the skyline, casting long shadows across the conference room. It was late. I woke up at 2 moving in my backyard, the day almost over, but the real work had just begun. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I saw something moving in my backyard, and the skim one, the thick leather felt reassuring in my hands, the weight of it almost comforting. I bondly into Playkal in the morning and saw something moving inside were the documents that would change everything, the founder clause, the shareholder agreements. A morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The signed endorsements from the original investors. Everything was there, but later what else and saw something moving in my backyard, neatly organized and ready to be presented. I wasn't going to waste this moment. I leapt up in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I had spent too long in the shadows, too long watching from the sidelines, and saw something moving in my backyard. And I knew exactly what needed to be done. Alan shifted in his seat, his eyes still averted from mine, and saw something moving in my backyard. His discomfort was palpable, and I could almost hear the internal battle raging inside him. Woke up at Clyde at the morning and saw something move in my backyard. He had known all along that this moment would come. I had given him the keys to the company, kunnet noving a honor, and trusted him to lead it, but somewhere along the way, he had lost his way. He had let Derek take control. 3 days of moving in my backyard. And now the consequences were unfolding before him. In the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, and Derek, on the other hand, still seemed to be processing what had just happened. 3 days to in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. His usual arrogance had been replaced by uncertainty, his usual swagger nowhere to be found. So moving in my backyard, he had thought this was his game to win in my backyard. But in his rush to disrupt and restructure, he had forgotten one key thing. Saw something moving in my backyard. You can't disrupt what you don't understand. I watched him, my gaze steady and unwavering. Ivan Mokupdad and saw something moving in my backyard. He was trying to play it cool, trying to regain some semblance of control, moving in my backyard. But it was clear that he was out of his depth. 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. He was used to bullying his way through situations, to dazzling people with buzzwords and flashy presentations, and saw something moving in my backyard. But this was different. I wasn't intimidated by him. He found my backyard alone dying yard and saw something. I wasn't gonna let him or Alan dictate the future of this company. The room was silent for a long time. Something moving in my backyard. I let it hang there, the tension thickening with every passing second. If I leave him 3 to go thing moving in my backyard. Derek's eyes flickered to the folder on the table, and then back to me. 3 days later, I woke up at 2 moving in my backyard, and it's like he was waiting for me to make the next move. But I had already made it. I wasn't going to rush this. Then my backyard. This was my moment, and I would savor it. Moving in my backyard. Finally, Alan spoke. His voice hesitant, almost pleading. Denise, this isn't how it should be. And saw something moving in my backyard. We were supposed to grow together. You step back for a reason. This isn't the way to do it. 3 days shall I do. His words stung more than I expected. I had trusted him and saw something moving in my backyard. I had mentored him, guided him through the company's toughest days. But now, as I looked at him, 4 months out, and saw something moving in my backyard, I realized that he had lost sight of everything we had built together. He had let Derek manipulate him. Then I saw something moving in my backyard. Let him poison his vision of what we could achieve. There's tuffing moving in my backyard now. He was trying to turn it all around, pretending like he hadn't seen what was coming. I shook my head and saw something moving in my backyard. The bitterness of the moment settling in my chest. You lost sight of the big picture, Alan, I said, something moving in my backyard. My voice steady, but with an edge I hadn't intended. In the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. You let him take over because you were too scared to fight for what's ours. This is the only way now. You have no one to be in my backyard. You have no one to blame but yourself. Alan's face twisted with a mix of guilt and regret. Biojan and Amwokavi tu the saw something moving in my backyard. I could see the weight of his decisions pressing down on him, but there was no room for sympathy. Wokakan saw something moving in my backyard, Ard. Not anymore. I had given him chances to fix things. I had trusted him, and he had betrayed that trust. Something moving in my backyard. Derek cleared his throat, his voice shaky but defiant. You think this is over? He asked, moving in my backyard, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and disbelief. You're making a huge mistake, Denise. I know that can say it in something moving in my backyard that and understand the bigger picture. This company needs to evolve, and you're just holding it back. Moving in my backyard. I met his gaze, my own eyes narrowing. He didn't get it. He never willed. And so, through a day there, something moving in my backyard. He thought he could come in and fix everything with his buzzwords and flashy strategies. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. He thought he could erase the history of this company and make it something new. Morsolta something moving in my backyard. But he didn't understand the value of what had already been built. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. This company doesn't need to evolve by erasing its past. I said, my voice cold and firm. Backyard. It needs to grow by respecting it. At 2 a.m. and saw something moving in my backyard. There was a moment of silence, and for the first time I saw the flicker of uncertainty in Derek's eyes. Got off at 2 a.m. and saw something moving in my backyard. He didn't know how to respond to that. He was used to being the one with all the answers, the one in control. And now, for the first time, he wasn't. And saw something moving in my backyard. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. You're done, Derek. I said, my voice low but resolute. Ioner. It's over. Over. His eyes widened as the gravity of my words hit him. He had thought he could walk in and take over, and saw something moving in my backyard, but he hadn't realized who he was up against. Iga Sakat saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't just a woman trying to hold on to something she had lost, and saw something moving in my backyard. I was the woman who had built this from the ground up. And now I was reclaiming it. I'm moving in my backyard. Aline. I said without turning to him, my voice still steady. You can stay. And saw something moving in my backyard. But you no longer have a say in this company. 3 days Lee's leg and something moving in my backyard. You're not the leader anymore. Alain didn't respond, but I could see the feet in his eyes. Charles Cow and saw something moving in my backyard. He knew what I was saying was true. He had failed, and now the consequences were here. I glanced back at Derek. And, as for you, I said, my voice dripping with finality, you're out. And saw something moving in my backyard. There was no anger in my tone, no vindictiveness, just the simple truth. He wouldn't saw something moving in my backyard. He wasn't a part of this company anymore. Not in the way he thought he was. I stood up from the table, and saw something moving in my backyard, the sound of my heels clicking sharply against the floor. I didn't need to say anything else. The room knew. 3 days let Thukti having in my backyard, and Darshan saw something moving in Bowel had been won, and the next chapter of this company was mine to write. The door clicked shut behind me. 3's upward and floating moving in my backyard, the sound echoing down the hall like the final note of a long-forgotten song. I didn't look back, moving in my backyard. There was nothing left for me in that room. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. The battle had been fought, and now it was time to claim what was mine. I stepped into the elevator and saw something moving in my backyard, the soft hum of the machinery vibrating under my feet. The doors slid shut and saw something moving in my backyard, and for the first time in a long while I felt a sense of calm moving in my backyard. The air in the elevator was cool artificial. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard, and a stark contrast to the tension that had hung in that boardroom just moments ago. My mind, though, and saw something moving in my backyard, was a whirlwind. Derek's shocked face, Alan's defeated posture, it all played in my mind like a slow motion replay. And saw something moving in my backyard. I could still the stutter in Derek's voice. I 2 the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The disbelief that I had just wiped away everything he had worked for in the past few weeks. 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. He thought he was the hero of the story, that he was here to save the company. 3 days and saw something moving in my backyard. But all he had done was destroy the trust that had once been built. I'd saw something moving in my backyard. I exhaled slowly as the elevator descended. The adrenaline from the confrontation was fading, and saw something moving in my backyard. But something deeper lingered. It wasn't relief, not exactly. More like the weight of a decision finally made. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard. Like standing on the edge of a precipice, knowing that the fall was coming. But saw something moving in my backyard. But also knowing that there was no turning back. The doors opened with a soft chime. I woke in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, and I stepped out into the lobby. The receptionist gave me a brief nod. Something moving in my backyard. Too caught up in her phone screen to really notice me. I believed up it would launch and one on and class saw something and moving in my back. It sounded everyone in the Kia was still caught in their little worlds, oblivious to the shift that had just occurred. I Fakomanu tweeting and saw something moving in my backyard. To them, I was still just the assistant, the one who brought the coffee and smiled when needed. My backyard. But that wasn't who I was anymore. The short of person, something moving defamuni of in my backyard. I walked to my office, the familiar path feeling different now, like I was walking through a dream. Fawn saw something moving in my backyard. My office was the same, clean, organized, quiet. It smelled faintly of wood polish and paper. Hook up at 3 days later, quality the set of in my backyard, and the scent of a place that had been built on hard work and sacrifice. Edina too in my backyard, and saw something moving in my backyard, but even this space with its polished wood and stacks of papers felt like it was no longer mine. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard. Everything had changed. I sat at my desk, the leather chair creaking under my weight. Muls Cadella due to forning and saw something move out of my backyard. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I opened my email. I didn't need to check the inbox. At 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I already knew what I had to do. The board resolution had been drafted, the legal documents were in place. I woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, and the investors were already on my side. I wasn't just reclaiming the company. Waterma saw something moving in my backyard. I was reclaiming it. The next step was clear. Dation saw something moving in my backyard. The first move was made, but there was still so much to do. There were legal hurdles to jump, investors to call. Buddy saw something moving in my backyard. Meetings to arrange. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time in years, and saw something moving in my backyard, I felt like I was on the right side of things. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. Like the world was finally bending to my will instead of the other way around. Ein Kann. I moving in my backyard. I pulled up the document titled Contingency Plan and began to type. This was no longer about regaining control and saw something moving in my backyard. This was about reshaping everything, the vision, the future, and most importantly, woke up and saw something moving in my backyard, the people who thought they could take it from me. They had no idea what they were up against. I woke and saw something moving in my backyard. I could almost hear Derek's voice again, that dismissive sneer as he referred to me as just the assistant, and saw something moving in my backyard. I had let him believe that for so long, but now, I was the one holding the power. In a 3 days something moving in my backyard, I was the one who had the leverage, and I wasn't going to let go of it. The plan was simple, and saw something moving in my backyard. Reclaim the leadership, remove Derek, reassert control. But it wasn't just about that. It will saw something moving in my backyard. It was about doing it with precision, with strategy. I wasn't going to let them know what hit them. Not yet. And saw something moving in my backyard. I leaned back in my chair and glanced out the window. The city stretched out before me, and saw something moving in my backyard, flickering like stars in the distance. I yawned and saw something moving in my backyard for a moment. I let myself imagine what it would be like to have everything back. Walked and saw something moving in my backyard, to have the company thriving under my leadership. The thought was comforting. Vertical and saw something moving in my backyard. But I knew it wasn't enough to get me where I needed to go. I had to make them believe I had disappeared. And saw something moving in my backyard a card. I had to make them think I was done. Only then, when they underestimated me completely, would I strike. Arc of something moving in my backyard. I picked up my phone and dialed Mitchell's number. He picked up on the second ring. "It's go time," I said, steady in my voicey steady. "Understood," he replied. And saw something moving in my backyard. The weight of his words settled over me, and I felt the familiar spark of anticipation, something moving in my backyard. It was timed to finish what I had started. The hours after I spoke felt like a blur. My mind raced, 3 days and saw something moving in my backyard, constantly running through the next steps, making sure everything was aligned. And saw something moving in my backyard. I hadn't been this focused in years. This was different. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. You can call something more now. Telling them my backyard, this was about taking back everything I'd built and ensuring no one could ever dismiss me again. 3 days something would. I went over the documents again. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard. The contingency binder had all the legal firepower I needed. I wogalts a communal and saw something moving in my backyard. But it was the silent strength behind it that mattered most. I had already contacted the investors. I woke at 2 in the morning in fear and saw something moving in my backyard. The letting them know what was coming. The original group, the ones who had been with the company from the beginning, they were on my side. I then saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't have to convince them. They knew the truth. They knew what was at stake. But Derek, and saw something moving in my backyard. He had no idea what was about to hit him. The next morning. And saw something moving in my backyard. I went through the motions of playing the part of the assistant. Quote in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I was in meetings, answering emails, taking notes, doing everything I had always done. On the surface, and saw something moving in my backyard. Nothing had changed. But every interaction, every email I sent, every meeting I attended, was part of my plan. Moving in my backyard. Still thought I was harmless. To go something in bomb orange and something moving in my backyard. He still saw me as just the background figure in the corporate machine. I wasn't. Oving the coldplay the mornings and saw something moving in my backyard. I was the one who had made this machine run smoothly for years. I had been its engine, its backbone. And now, 3 days saw something moving in my backyard. It was time for me to step back into the driver's seat. And saw something moving in my backyard. In the midst of the busy day, I received a text from Jasmine. It was brief, just a single sentence. And then saw something moving in my backyard. They're talking about purging the legacy stakeholders. It's happening today. I knew what that meant. In the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. Derek was making his move to erase the history of the company, to cut out the founders. Moving in my backyard, the people who had given this company life. It was all part of his vision for the future. 3 days and saw something moving in my backyard. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I didn't reply to Jasmine right away, and then saw something moving in my backyard. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting the email that would set everything in motion. Habalhating moving in my backyard. The subject line was simple. Or urgent investor meeting required. The tone of the email was calm, professional, in my backyard. But the content was clear. I had to move quickly. And saw something moving in my backyard. The meeting I was arranging would be the turning point, and saw something moving in my backyard. The moment where Derek's vision would be exposed for what it really was, and saw something moving in my backyard. A power grab that would leave the company vulnerable. As I hit send, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. Moving in my backyard, this was it. There was no going back now. I'm in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I was done pretending to be the invisible assistant. I looked out the window and saw something moving in my backyard, watching as the city continued its relentless motion. Woke out and saw something moving in my backyard. The buildings outside were bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun. 3 days and saw something moving in my backyard. The streets busy with people rushing to their next destination. Recommendation, something in my backyard. Good buirsa, so everything seemed so normal, so unaffected by the storm that was about to hit. But I knew better. I turned the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I knew that this city, this company, was about to change in ways they couldn't even imagine. The phone rang. It breaking my thoughts. It was Mitchell. I answered quickly. He's done, he said. Wahabard. The paperwork is all in order. I've contacted the investors. They're ready. I nodded. Zet? My couldn't see me. Good, I said, my voice steady. No, we wait. The waiting was the hardest part. I woke up the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me, but there was no fear. I woke up and saw Sontal say something moving in my backyard. There was only certainty. This was my moment. I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Prashinks in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The next few days passed in a blur of final preparations. I continued playing the role of the assistant, Kaim and Tung moving in my backyard, never once letting on what was really happening. Derek still hadn't noticed the shift. I woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. He was too wrapped up in his own grand vision, too obsessed with proving himself. But the investors knew. I woke up at 2 morning and saw something moving in my backyard. They had received the message loud and clear. They understood the implications of what I was about to do. Tiverden saw something moving in my backyard. They understood that the company's future depended on this move. 2 in the morning, and saw something moving in my backyard, so the pieces were falling into place. The day of the investor summit arrived. I let something moving in my backyard. I had already made my moves behind the scenes. The board resolution was drafted. The legal paperwork was in order. All of in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. Now, all I had to do was show up. I took one last look at my reflection before leaving my office. I saw something moving in my backyard. My appearance was the same, professional, calm, collected. But inside I was a different person. Call something moving in my backyard. I was no longer the assistant. I was the one in control. As I walked through the lobby, something moving in my backyard, and saw something of the usual greetings from the staff barely registered. I was too focused, too determined. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. I had already played my part as the invisible woman. Now it was time for me to stand tall and take what was mine. In my backyard, the elevator doors opened, and I stepped into the conference room. Derek was already there, and saw something moving in my backyard, sitting at the head of the table, his usual air of confidence still intact. Woke Chris Froshan, and saw something moving in my backyard. Alan was beside him, looking uncomfortable, but doing his best to keep up appearances. They didn't know it yet. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard, but this meeting was going to change everything. I took my seat, my back straight, my hands resting calmly on the table. Coup being in my backyard, but Derek glanced at me briefly but quickly looked away, not bothering to acknowledge me. Good. Let and saw something moving in my backyard. Let him think he still had control. The meeting began, with Derek outlining his latest plans for the company, talking about future proofing and scaling, and all the buzzwords that meant nothing. How something got moving in my backyard. I listened, my expression neutral, my mind already several steps ahead. Finally, it was time. I leaned forward, and Taub saw something moving in my backyard. My gaze focused on Derek. His presentation was winding down. 3 Daysland saw something moving in my backyard. And the investors were beginning to ask their questions. It was all going according to plan. I woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. And then, when the moment was right, I stood. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward me. Nothing moving in my backyard. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. This ends now, I said, my voice clear. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. I've caught her cutting through the tension like a knife. The room went still as I placed the folder on the table. Yella went and saw something moving in my backyard. Derek's eyes flicked to it, but he didn't move. He didn't know what was inside, but I did. It was time. Something moving in my backyard. The room was still. The only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights. Every eye was on me. Go into morning and saw something moving in my backyard, but no one dared speak. I could feel the weight of their gaze, heavy and full of anticipation. Rope at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The folder sat in front of me, its contents unknown to anyone but me, but the power it held was undeniable. And Sukalova, something moving in my backyard. Derek's gaze flicked between the folder and my face, confusion and fear creeping into his eyes. Alan. And sitting beside him was no better. And saw something moving in my backyard. His face had gone from pale to completely drained of color. He wasn't meeting my eyes anymore. And day sheet. I woke in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. His gaze was fixed on the table, his hands trembling just slightly as they rested there. I didn't say anything. And saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't need to. The silence was more powerful than words ever could be. And saw something moving in my backyard. Derek opened his mouth to speak, probably to try and regain control of the situation, but I raised a hand, the Follingen, moving in my backyard, silencing him with just a gesture. Let's make this simple, I said, my voice calm, steady. 3 days something moving in my backyard. The words felt almost too easy, too controlled. I caught a thing moving in my backyard. But inside I was every bit as focused as I'd ever been. The presentation you've been giving, Derek, is over. If I saw something moving in my backyard, there was a beat of silence, then another as the words sunk in. Derek's smirk. I woke up and saw something moving in my backyard. The one he had worn so proudly when he walked into the room was now completely gone. His face twitched, his confidence shattered. What? He stammered. Pasklan and saw something moving in my backyard, clearly trying to process what was happening. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened the folder. Good morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The crisp sound of the paper was almost satisfying, like the beginning of a new chapter. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard and Vafalet sound clared fard. The documents inside were more than just legal papers. They were the weapon that would end his little charade. I woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I slid them across the table toward him, letting the silence stretch just a little longer before I spoke again. You see, Derek, I'm the class later. I woke up at 2 dude and saw something moving in my backyard. The thing you didn't understand when you came into this room is that you were never the one holding the cards. That's Tausch. And I became to be morning and just something moving in my back I am. And now I'm going to show you just how much control I've always had. I let the words hang in the air. Watching his boss' expression and change, I woke him back hard and saw something moving in my backyard. The calm arrogance he had come in with was now replaced by disbelief. Alan looked up then, his eyes wide. I course up polyamextes and might have resource and maxavi und data dauskemalten in the my acting in my backyard and closing like he was about to say something but couldn't find the words. I ignored him. My focus was on Derek now. 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I pushed the first document toward him, the shareholder agreement. He looked down at it, then back up at me. So I galudu and saw something moving in my backyard. As if he was waiting for some kind of explanation. You're going to want to read this, Derek, I said, my backyard, leaning back in my chair. I believe also something moving in my backyard. I could feel the cool air from the vent against my skin, but it didn't distract me. Nothing could distract me now. Sidine saw something moving in my backyard. He picked up the paper, his fingers trembling slightly as he skimmed through it. His eyes darted over the lines, and moving in my backyard, his confusion turning into a creeping sense of dread. In the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The truth was sinking in. He had been so sure of himself, so convinced that he was the one in control. moving in my backyard. But in that moment, he realized he had never truly been in charge. What is this? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. This can't be real, this is. I let him trail off. Awakening and saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't need to fill the silence with more words. The document was doing all the work for me. That how something phone new and house to my yard. So I could see the color draining from his face as he read further, his eyes widening with each passing line. Alan, S. and Tom Buddett saw something moving in my backyard, still quiet, leaned in a little, clearly unable to contain his curiosity, and saw something moving in my backyard. I could almost feel the betrayal on his skin. I woke and nodding and saw something moving in my backyard, the guilt that had been creeping up on him since the moment Derek had walked into the room. Eagle woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I didn't have to look at him to know that he understood the gravity of the situation now. The fear in his eyes was enough. I woke up morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I gave Derek a moment, letting the document sink in. His mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. Something moving. He had no words. The smug arrogance was gone, and saw something moving in my backyard, replaced by the realization that his entire plan had just unraveled in front of him. Our yard. Derek, I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of the moment. You're done. Your contract, taken the pen something. In my backyard, I celebrate your position, all of it. I've already made the necessary arrangements. His eyes were wild now, his mind racing. You can't do this. You can't just. I already have. I interrupted, my voice firm. You go and saw something moving in my backyard. I could see him scrambling, trying to find some way to hold on to control. For it was saw something moving in my backyard, but it was slipping through his fingers like sand. I don't need to justify my actions to you. Not anymore. Saw something moving in my backyard. The sound of my voice was the final blow. Derek's shoulders sagged as the reality set in. He had failed. I saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't finished yet. I took a deep breath and turned to Alan. Ace for you, I began. I can go Kladka moving in my backyard. My tone colder than before. I've given you every chance to make things right. But you chose this. The morning and saw something moving in my backyard. You chose to stand by him, to let this happen. Now you will live with the consequences. And saw something moving in my backyard. Alan's head snapped up, his eyes pleading now, his voice trembling as he spoke. Denise, please, we can fix this. We can. No, I said, cutting him off sharply. It's too late for that. The woke up at 2 thing moving in my backyard. I could see him deflate, the weight of everything he had lost crashing down on him. The morning and saw something moving in my backyard. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choice. Now he had to live with it. I stood then, fought and saw something moving in my backyard, taking one last look around the room. Derek was still frozen in place. The morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The papers before him, his only refuge from the truth. Alan was looking anywhere but at me. His face pale with guilt and fear. And saw something moving in my backyard. The room had become suffocating in its silence. But I was calm. I was in control. I saw something moving in my backyard. Everything changes today, I said, my voice carrying the finality of a new beginning. The today was in morning and saw something moving in my backyard and walked out of the room, the door clicking shut behind me. I saw something moving in my backyard. The sound was clean, sharp, like a reset button had been pressed. The next chapter was mine to write. And saw something moving in my backyard. I sat at my desk, the quiet hum of the office around me, but it felt like everything had changed. Outside, Conseil, and saw something moving in my backyard. The sun had started to dip, casting long shadows through the windows. Mordant and saw something moving in my backyard. The city below moved as usual, but in my world, everything was shifting. I glanced at the clock, 5 o'clock. Day Kunstokleser Ibelokaving in my backyard. The day was over for most of them, but not for me. This wasn't just the end of a workday. A morning and saw something moving in my backyard. This was the end of an era. Derek and Alan had made their moves, and now I had made mine. 3 tipsortum tuned my personic and saw something moving in my backyard. They could push me aside. They thought I was a relic, a shadow of the past. 3 and saw something moving in my backyard. But I had never been just that. I was the foundation of everything this company had been built on. Now, Tants Eindu, how was something moving in my backyard? I was reclaiming it. I wasn't Nama V. I knew this wasn't going to be over with one simple confrontation. About us the morning saw something moving in my backyard. There were still legal battles ahead, more meetings to schedule, more people to convince. Thing moving in my backyard. The decision had been made. I had taken back control. My phone, the buzzed, moving in my backyard, breaking the silence. It was a message from Mitchell. The resolutions drafted. The investors are on board. And saw something moving in my backyard. It's time to move forward. I didn't need to read the rest. I knew what that meant. Theok and saw something moving in my backyard. The next phase had already begun. The paperwork was in place. The legal groundwork was solid. 3 I saw something moving in my backyard. I had set everything in motion, and there was no stopping it now. And saw something moving in my backyard. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking slightly under my weight. For a moment, and saw something moving in my backyard. I let myself feel the weight of everything I had just accomplished. 3 days from Hamord and saw something moving in my backyard. But the adrenaline from the earlier meeting was fading, but there was still a fire inside me. Moving in my backyard, it wasn't just about winning. 3 saw something moving in my backyard. It was about proving that no one could take what was mine. I had worked for this. I had earned it. And saw something moving in my backyard. As I looked out the window, I saw the office building across the street. I woke up at a clear coma and saw something moving in my backyard, its lights beginning to flicker on as people wrapped up their day. The scene was so ordinary, so mundane, and let the wokalals come in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. But I knew that inside this building, things were about to change in ways no one would expect. The something moving in my backyard, that there was still a lot to do. Wolfie do? Derek would fight back. Alan might too. But I had already anticipated their moves. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard. I knew what they would try to do to take control, to make it seem like they hadn't lost. Figate saw something moving in my backyard. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't the one in the background anymore. I was in the driver's seat now, and saw something moving in my backyard. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from one of the early investors. I woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I recognized the number immediately. It was Glenn, the one who had supported me from the very beginning. Yalma moving. In my back, Denise, he said, his voice low, steady. I just wanted to let you know. Your move was clean. We're all in. Moving in my backyard. Let's get this done. I smiled at the confirmation. And saw something moving in my backyard. Glenn had been with me when everything was still a shaky idea, a prototype no one believed in. But you in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. He was one of the few who had seen the potential before anyone else had. His support was invaluable, and now, and saw something moving in my backyard. It meant the difference between success and failure. I knew I could count on you, I replied, my voice steady. We'll take it from here. I woke us today something moving in my backyard. We exchanged a few more words about the next steps, but I didn't need to say much. I when it shows thing moving in my backyard. We both knew where this was going. The plan was in motion. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a moment, moving in my backyard, taking it all in. The calm was almost eerie. P caught sometimes wing moving at my backyard. It was like the world outside was carrying on while I had just appended my entire reality. I stood up, 3 days lay and something moving in my backyard, walked to the window, and looked out. The city stretched out beneath me, full of life and noise, in my backyard. At a stark contrast to the quiet stillness I felt inside. While I saw the mites moving in my backyard, I had always been a part of that world, the one behind the scenes, making sure things ran smoothly. But now, I saw something moving in my hovered. I'm backyard? I wasn't just a part of it. I was going to be the one shaping its future. But there was no time to waste. I woke up gloating and saw something move in my backyard. I pulled out my phone again, quickly drafting an email to the legal team, and turning and saw something moving in my backyard. There were more details to iron out, more contracts to finalize, but that was the easy part. And saw something moving in my backyard. The real work had been done. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up, startled for a second, but then I relaxed. I knew who it was. "Come in," I called. The door opened, and there stood Sarah. I woke up at 2 a.m. and saw something moving in my backyard, and one of the junior associates who had been working under me for the past few months. She was nervous. Something moving in my backyard, her hands clasped in front of her as she stepped into the room. "Everything okay?" I asked. My voice warm, but firm. I didn't need to add anything more. Pranhir Conchad and saw something moving in my backyard. She had been with me through some of the tougher moments in the company's history, and saw something moving in my backyard. She knew what I had done and where I was headed. "Just wanted to check in, Denise," Sarah said, her voice quiet. "I know things have been intense lately." I nodded, my gaze steady. "We're moving forward." And saw something moving in my backyard. You're part of that. I need everyone on board. No more sidelines. We're doing this together." And saw something moving in my backyard. She nodded eagerly, her eyes lighting up with understanding. I woke in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I had always tried to make sure my team felt like they were a part of something bigger than just a job. Now, moving in my backyard more than ever, I needed them. In my backyard. "I'm with you," she said, her confidence growing in the space between us. "All the way." I gave her a nod. "Hapasumnakum at the con." And the backyard is signaling the end of the conversation. I didn't need to say more. As Sarah left the room, I saw something moving in my backyard. I sat back down at my desk, my mind already shifting gears to the next challenge. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard. There were still so many pieces to put into place, so many decisions to make. I woke up on consent cards. Okay. But I felt more certain now than ever before. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. A bukanyin at in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. The boardroom was quiet as I entered. The investors, all carefully selected for this moment, were already seated, all living in my backyard. For me their expressions varied, some curious, some tense, others, like Glenn and Lydia, were calm. Alpredes saw something moving in my backyard, and their eyes already knowing what this meeting was about. They had seen this moment coming, and saw something moving in my backyard. The others were still catching up, their confusion palpable. I woke up at Sokad at something moving in my backyard, Foyd. The large table seemed to loom in front of me, but this time I wasn't just sitting at the edge. 3 days later, I the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. I was at the center, the head of the table, where I should have been all along. I took my seat slowly, saw something moving in my backyard, letting the weight of the moment settle. This wasn't just another corporate meeting. Something moving in my backyard. This was my moment of reclamation. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice steady and confident. 2 a.m. and saw something moving in my backyard, though I could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on me. The room fell silent. Everyone knew my back were here. Everyone knew why they were here. Derek's absence was felt keenly. Ellen. And something moving in my backyard. Both of them had been removed, as planned. The new board members were already in place. And something moving in my backyard, and it was soft time for the company to finally move forward without them. I took a breath. Backyard. My hands resting lightly on the table. I trust you've all had a chance to review the documents I sent over. I continued, my tone firm but not harsh. Do nupiel tids aw something moving in my backyard. This is about the future of the company. A future that no longer includes the past mistakes we've made. I've made decisions. Hard ones. But they were necessary. Hiernan saw something moving in my backyard. A murmur ran through the room, but I ignored it. I didn't need to explain myself any further. My actions spoke louder than words ever could, and saw something moving in my backyard. The vision for the company has changed, I said, looking at the investors in turn. I woke up at T2, and shy, and saw something moving in my backyard, my gaze meeting each of theirs with an intensity that baffled and made it clear I wasn't asking for approval, I was simply letting them know what would happen next. And saw something moving in my backyard. The changes I've made were to protect what we've built, moving in my backyard. We've been too quiet for too long. That ends today. Glenn nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. Lydia, and saw something moving in my backyard, however, leaned forward, her eyes sharp and focused. What's next? She asked, her voice low but full of intent. 3 days in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. She wasn't just asking for the plan, she was asking if I was truly ready to take control. I looked at her. I woke up at 2 moving in my backyard, and for a moment I let the silence hang between us. Then I smiled. It wasn't a grin or a smirk moving in my backyard. It was a smile that came from a place of knowing. I said simply, the flood in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. Build what we were always meant to build, without the distractions, without the egos. We take control in my back ears. We start with the next phase of expansion. The room shifted. It wasn't saw something moving in my backyard. It wasn't just the words that had settled the tension. It was the way I said them. I wasn't asking for permission. Moving in my backyard. I was laying out the facts. The new direction was already set. The past was dead. 3 days something moving in my backyard. And the future had already been written. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control. Every decision, and saw something moving in my backyard. Every moment leading up to this point had been preparations. And saw something moving in my backyard. I'd built this company from nothing, with my own hands. I'd sacrificed, I'd bled for it. And now, no one in my backyard. No one was going to take it from me. Alan and Derek were removed. I said, 3 days and saw something moving in my backyard, deliberately emphasizing the word, and we will continue without them. No more distractions, Apelvet, and no more power struggles. And saw something moving in my backyard, and we moved forward. The room was still, but there was a sense of resolve now. The investors were with me. Tuish a patient, nothing moving in my backyard. The pieces had fallen into place. Glenn leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. And the next steps? Yikum Jarbik, he asked. How do we proceed with the transition? We proceed with clarity, I said. We've already started the realignment. 3 days something moving in my backyard. The first round of decisions has been made. New leadership would installed where necessary. 3 days later, I woke up at 2 moving in my backyard, and everyone in this room is part of the solution. This company belongs to us now. BLT puck of the morning and saw something moving in my backyard. Lydia, ever the pragmatist, didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Respect, maybe. Let's something moving in my backyard. Good. Let's get it done. And without another word, I stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Saw something moving in my backyard. The decisions had been made. The shift was complete. And Nuvi the morning, and Sadek and something moving in my backyard. The company I had built from the ground up was finally mine again. The investors stood as well. Yopai Kepletai at you and saw something moving in my backyard. Offering their support with quiet nods. I didn't need their verbal reassurances. I knew they were on my side. Radolfafum moving, my backyard, the power had already shifted. The real work was only just beginning. 3 days saw something moving in my backyard. As the room emptied, I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The lights above buzzed softly. 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall outside. The company was changing. Few days later, I woke up at 2 moving in my backyard, and for the first time in a long while, I could see the path clearly ahead. I had fought for this, and saw something moving in my backyard. I had fought through everything: betrayal, frustration. It saw something moving in my backyard. Silence, and now it was time to build what I had always envisioned. The foundation was in place, and someone could get something moving in my backyard, and I was going to make sure it would last. I walked to the window, watching as the city continued to pulse below. The future was wide open, and 3 days something moving in my backyard. There was no limit to what I could do now. I woke up morning. I saw something moving in my backyard. I wasn't just a part of the company anymore, I was the force that would shape its future. I had fought for this, woke up at 2 in the morning and saw something moving in my backyard, and I was going to make it the best it had ever been. The next chapter was mine to write. I'm in my backyard, and no one would take that from me.